Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantika Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajiva Sadhuvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Deva Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Shakhantamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deen Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namustate Tapta Kanchan Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo. So today we will be talking about a small part of the Leela of the Shamantaka jewel and Krishna and the Dwarkavasis. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Let's see here. Okay. Can someone give me a yay for if they can see my screen?
Okay.
Jai. Thank you, Guru. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Canto 10 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 57, verse 31. Iti ango padishyanti eke vishmritya praga udahritam munivasa nivase kim ghateta rishta darshanam. Translation by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Some men proposed that the troubles were due to Akura's absence, but they had forgotten the glories of the Supreme Lord, which they themselves had so often described. Indeed, how can calamities occur in a place where the personality of Godhead, the residence of all the sages, resides? Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti provides the following insight on this verse. In Benares, Akura became famous for performing sacrifices on golden altars and for his abundant charity to the Brahmanas. When the citizens of Dwarka heard about this, some of them gossiped that Krishna, considering Akura's arrival, had sent him into exile. To dispel this new and incredible stain on his reputation, Lord Krishna created various calamities in Dwarka, thus inducing the citizens to call for Akura's return, which the Lord then ordered. I'm going to keep reading the verses for today, and then we'll discuss them as a whole. Verse 32 of 57. Deve varshati kashishaha svafalkaya gataya vai svasutam gandinim pradat tato varshat sma kashishu. The elders said, previously when Lord Indra had withheld rain from Kashi Panaris, the king of that city gave his daughter Gandhini to Svapalka, who was then visiting him. It soon rained in the kingdom of Kashi. Svapalka was Akura's father, and the citizens felt that the son must have the same power as the father. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that because of Akura's relationship with his maternal grandfather, the king of Kashi, in a time of difficulty, Akura went to that city. Verse 33. Tat sutas tat prabhavo sav akruro yatra yatraha devo bhivarshate tatra no patapa na marikaha. Wherever his equally powerful son Akura stays, Lord Indra will provide sufficient rain. Indeed, that place will be free of miseries and untimely deaths. And the final verse for today, verse 34 of chapter 57. Iti vridha vachaha shrutva naitavad iha karanam iti matva samanaya praha kruram janardanaha. Hearing these words from the elders, Lord Janardhan, though aware that the absence of a Kura was not the only cause of the evil omens, had him summoned back to Dwarka and spoke to him. Purport. Since Lord Krishna is the supreme controller, it was obviously by his will that certain troubles appeared in the city of Dwarka. Superficially, these evils may have been caused by Kura's absence and also by the absence of the auspicious Shamantaka jewel. But we should recall that Dwarka is the eternal abode of Lord Krishna. It is a city of divine bliss because the Lord resides there. Still, to execute his pastimes as a prince of this world, Lord Krishna did the needful and summoned a Kura. I'm going to stop sharing here. Let's see. Stop share. Fantastic. I invite you, if you feel so inspired, to show up on video and we can have a more personal discussion. Thank you, Jeffrey Prue, Henry Prue, and devotees of the Bhakti Center for inviting me here to speak and to be present here with me as we discuss this fascinating pastime. I wanted to give a little bit of background on this pastime of the Shamantaka jewel. And I'm curious, before I dive into that, perhaps one of the co-hosts who has been listening to these talks can clarify. Has someone gone over the broad arc of this pastime recently? Is that something I can go over, if you think that'll be appropriate, the Shamantaka jewel pastime?
Janitai Prabhu says someone has done that, but you can do it briefly.
Okay, well, I don't need to do it in any great length, but the reason I want to talk about it is because, to me, this particular pastime of Krishna, I kept asking myself, why is it that Krishna and the energy of Yogamaya, his superior energy, is arranging this particular situation in Dwarka? What kind of rasa is Krishna experiencing out of these pastimes, out of these situations? And so I want to quickly outline briefly the pastimes of the Shamantaka jewel so we can come to some understanding of the nature of Lila and the nature of the rasas Krishna is experiencing through the course of these events. So you may remember that Satrajit comes in to Dwarka wearing the Shamantaka jewel, King Satrajit, whose daughter is Satyabhama. But Satyabhama and Krishna have not been married yet. Satrajit walks in to Dwarka and he is glowing. He's so effulgent that everyone in Dwarka believes him to be the sun god. And they quickly go to Krishna and they tell Krishna, the sun god has arrived with pride in the fact that all these amazing personalities are coming to visit their Lord. But Krishna, of course, knows that Satrajit isn't the sun god. And actually, Satrajit he sort of ignores Krishna and he sets up the worship of the Shamantaka jewel that gives him this effulgence in a temple there. He doesn't offer, when Krishna asks for the Shamantaka jewel to be offered to the king, Ugrasen, because the king should have the best of everything. Satrajit ignores that request and sets up the separate worship of the jewel in the temple, and he gains a lot of wealth from it because this jewel is supposed to be creating hundreds and hundreds of pounds of gold every single day. I think it's like at least 170. So there's this very powerful jewel, and Satrajit is clearly under the influence of the effect of this jewel, the maya of this jewel, so to speak. And in the meantime, there's his brother, Satrajit's brother, who goes into the forest on horseback with this jewel for some reason, and in the process gets attacked by a lion and essentially eaten or killed by a lion who takes the jewel away from him. And then enters Jambavan from the Ramayana, who then kills the lion and takes the jewel, this incredible jewel. And Jambavan, being the devotee that he is, just gives the jewel as a plaything to his son. And all this time, everyone in Dwarka, sort of spurred on by Satrajit, starts to create rumors that since Satrajit didn't give Lord Krishna the Syamantaka jewel, Lord Krishna must have stolen the Syamantaka jewel from Satrajit's brother. So there's all these rumors. And by the way, Dwarka doesn't come out looking great during these pastimes. The Dwarka Vasis, not a good look for them. All the rumors going around Dwarka. We'll talk a little bit more about that. In any case, there are all these rumors. So Krishna decides he has to clear his name. He goes to the forest. He finds the corpse of the lion, and through some investigations, figures out that it's actually Jambavan, who is really the only creature as powerful enough to have defeated this lion and lives in this forest. And so Krishna makes his way to Jambavan's home, which happens to be in this elaborate cave system. And all the Dwarkavasis are afraid of this cave. And so Krishna enters the cave alone. He enters the cave alone, and because, he's the Supreme Lord, but he's also in this position of power, and he has a reputation to uphold. So while all the Dwarkavasis stay outside, you'll notice a great difference from the Vrindavan pastimes, even in this situation. Whereas all the cowherd boys were happy to enter the mouth of all the demons that they were exploring, including Agasura. In Dwarka, all the Dwarkavasis stay outside, and Krishna walks in to this dark and foreboding cave system. Krishna walks in. He eventually finds Jambavan's son playing with the Syamantaka jewel, but the maidservant taking care of the son is afraid, and she screams out, and Jambavan comes to the rescue. Jambavan, not recognizing his Lord Ramchandra in Lord Krishna, he starts to essentially challenge Krishna to a battle, seeing Krishna as a threat to his child, and as a threat to the jewel. And so they battle, and they don't just battle, but they war for 28 days. In the meantime, outside the cave system, halfway through this battle, just 15 days or so, the Dwarkavasis, they give up. Again, not a great look for them, but they decide, who knows what happened to Krishna? We're going to go back to Dwarka. So the Dwarkavasis go back to Dwarka. And in Dwarka, Vasudev and Devaki and Queen Rukmini are all pretty upset that the Dwarkavasis have come back without Krishna. They're distressed. And while at the same time, Krishna is enjoying the rasa of battle and combat with Jambavan, who is supposed to be the most superior warrior on the planet at this time. And so they're battling. Eventually, when Jambavan realizes after a month that he is being worn out by this combatant, he realizes something changes in him by Yogamaya's grace and arrangement. He realizes that this is not an ordinary person, but his own supremely beloved deity. Lord Ramachandra appeared in another form. And when he recognizes this, Krishna, he offers prayers to Krishna. And there's such a sweet moment described in this chapter where Krishna then begins to massage the limbs of Jambavan to relieve him of his pains from fighting the Lord of the universe, which is no joke, right? Jambavan must be a really special person, or bear person. In any case, Jambavan then offers both the Syamantaka jewel and his daughter Jambavati to Krishna. So he offers Jambavati's hand to Krishna, and Krishna eventually leaves the cave system, goes back to Dwarka and to celebrate the return. Dwarkavasis are really joyous, and they had been approaching actually Devi, a particular form of the goddess, to ask for Krishna's return. And so this is all a beautiful pastime. It's all a beautiful pastime. And because Krishna's returned and he's trying to clear his name. King Ugrasen invites all the kings of the area and asks Krishna to explain, okay, what is the story of the Shamantaka jewel? How did it disappear? And Krishna explains about the lion, about Jambavan, and all of this. He clears his name. And so Satrajit is feeling bad. Satrajit is feeling bad that Krishna, that he had essentially defamed Krishna. He'd spread rumors about Krishna. And so he offers the Shamantaka jewel to Krishna, and he offers his own daughter's hand, Satyabhama, to Krishna. And this is how Krishna and Satyabhama come together. But Krishna reciprocates with our desires. And so Krishna lets Satrajit have the Shamantaka jewel because he knows in his heart that even though Satrajit is offering it to him, he really wants it for himself. So Satrajit keeps the Shamantaka jewel and continues the worship of it in its own little temple. In the meantime, Krishna and Satyabhama have left for Hastinapur because the Pandavas at the same time, the Mahabharat's happening at the same time. And so the Pandavas have supposedly died in the fire in the Lac Palace created by Duryodhana and his brothers. So to supposedly mourn the Pandavas, Krishna and Satyabhama leave Dwarka. And while they're away, the Dwarkavasis, some Dwarkavasis begin to plot to steal the Shamantaka jewel from Satrajit. Satrajit's relationship with the Shamantaka jewel is really fraught. He seems to keep losing it. So he should have taken a message here, taken a message from the circumstances, but he was attached. So he keeps losing it. And so there's a plot being brewed at this time. And one of the main players is Shatadhanva. Shatadhanva and Kura, in fact, surprisingly. So we're getting to the verses here. Shatadhanva eventually is convinced through his really bad association to steal the jewel, the Shamantaka jewel from Satrajit, but not just to do that, but to go in and actually kill Satrajit, kill Satrajit, and I believe most of his family that's present there. So this is an atrocious thing is happening in Dwarka. And Srila Prabhupada explains how even despite the presence of Lord Krishna, there are always and have always been people who, even when God is staring you in the face, you won't be able to see his divinity, his divine form, and will not be able to live up to that sublime standard of what it means to be a devotee of the Lord, even in his presence. So Shatadhanva murders Satyajit, steals the Shamantaka jewel, and when Krishna and Satyabhama find out, they immediately leave. Krishna really mourns the passing of his father-in-law. It's described in Krishna book how Krishna really mourns the passing of his father-in-law Satrajit, and they rush back to Dwarka. And because Shatadhanva now has the jewel, he's a little bit afraid, and he tries to take shelter. He knows that the Supreme Lord is coming back to find out the cause of this disaster in his family. And so he's a little bit afraid, and he goes to Kura and Kura's associates asking for shelter, but they're like, no, we can't help you. This is the Supreme Lord. This is not an ordinary living being. We can't help you in this predicament. So even though they had encouraged Shatadhanva, now they're like, can't help you. Sorry, your enemies are too powerful for us. And so Shatadhanva leaves the Shamantaka jewel with Kura, and he runs. He supposedly found this really incredible horse, and he rides the horse that can go for 400 miles without stopping. Krishna and Balaram engage in this chase, right? This is getting really exciting, actually, in a sense. They're engaging in this chase on horseback. Eventually, Shatadhanva's horse dies of exhaustion, and he's running on foot. And then there's this interesting passage in Krishna book where Srila Prabhupada describes that Krishna and Balaram decide it would be unfair to continue on horseback, so they get off. Now, what I don't get is how any fight or chase with the Supreme Lord can be fair. But, that's as it stands. Krishna decides to go on foot and chase Shatadanva, and eventually when he loses his patience, he sends Sri Chakra to take care of Shatadanva. He's taken care of Shatadanva, and then he goes to search the body. And he doesn't find any jewel, which is surprising to him because, everyone knew that he'd stolen the jewel. So Lord Balaram doesn't know. Krishna has his intuitions about where the jewel is. Balaram decides to stay in Mithila. Krishna returns, and he explains to all the Dwarkavasis that he didn't find the Shamantaka jewel. And that's what brings us to these verses, because Kura, who has the Shamantaka jewel, knowing that Krishna is returning, actually leaves. He leaves, I believe, for Kashi Panaris. Feel free to correct me if someone knows better on that. He leaves for Kashi Panaris, and there he's doing many sacrifices and ceremonies with all this gold that he's receiving from the Shamantaka jewel. He has an altar of gold on which he's performing these sacrifices, right? So tremendous amounts of wealth. And because he's doing it on such a regular basis, he has the sort of fame about his giving that is spreading throughout the land. So Krishna is starting to put two and two together and realizing that really it must be that Kura has the Shamantaka jewel. And in the meantime, residents of Dwarka are perceiving calamities. They are perceiving calamities in terms of like not enough rain and drought, but also personal calamities, distresses from other beings. And they are blaming this on the departure of Kura. In the purport we read, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that actually they're perceiving these calamities because they were participating in rumor mongering, in essentially prajalpa, in the defamation of the Supreme Lord, in thinking that it was actually Krishna who had exiled Kura from Dwarka. And so in so many situations, the Dwarkavasis, they don't come out looking so good. And so Vishwanath Chakravarti is saying that's why they're perceiving, this is their reaction essentially. That's why they're perceiving these calamities in Dwarka, the lack of rain especially. And they're not recognizing that the Supreme Lord is in control of everything, and the fact that the Supreme Lord exists in Dwarka, in their own city, is reason enough for that city of Dwarka to be Vaikuntha without any distress. They're not recognizing that is exactly part of why they are receiving these reactions too. So the residents of Dwarka, they decide that Akura is left, and because Akura's father, when he had come to city of Kashi, had removed all the distresses, and Indra had produced rain, and so the son must have the same power as the father, and therefore the son, having left, is the cause of these calamities in Dwarka. Be that as it may, Krishna decides to summon Akura. Krishna, knowing that that's not the reason, he still decides to summon Akura. He decides to summon Kura, and Kura, being a devotee still, despite his desires and complicated relationship to this whole plot and conspiracy, essentially, to steal the Shamantaka jewel, he accepts the summons from his Supreme Lord, and he comes to Dwarka. He comes to Dwarka and appears in front of Krishna, and Krishna says basically, "Look, Akura, I know you have the Shamantaka jewel. Can you please show it to me so that everyone sees it too?" And there's an interesting section here where, in a brief line in the Bhagavatam, Krishna says, Balaram doesn't agree. Balaram doesn't think you have it. And so for Balaram's sake, let's get to the bottom of this. So it seems like Krishna and Balaram here are having a sort of friendly debate about who they think has the Shamantaka jewel. The mystery of the Shamantaka jewel needs to be revealed. Balaram probably has his own assumptions and ideas, and Krishna has his own. And in this case, Krishna just wants to get to the bottom of it. So he invites Kura for his own internal reason, and on the outside, trying to appease the citizens of Dwarka. And when asked, Kura does present the Shamantaka jewel, and even though he's feeling contrition in his heart and offers it back to Krishna, Krishna tells him to keep it. Krishna says, there's no one better than you to keep it. So again, Krishna is fulfilling desires of his devotees, however they approach him, right? He let Satrajit keep the Shamantaka jewel because Satrajit really wanted it. And then he let Kura keep the jewel because Kura really wanted it. And this is all despite Krishna pointing out that actually the jewel doesn't belong to you, Kura. It belongs to Satyabhama's son, who is, because Satyabhama is pregnant, the son that is to come. Because Satrajit and all his family members are now dead, and Satyabhama and her son are now the true heirs of this jewel. But despite all of this, he says, you can keep it because you want it. So Krishna is merciful in this way, but it's interesting because sometimes he gives us enough free will to hang ourselves, so to speak, enough rope to hang ourselves, to pursue our desires to the extent that it allows us to be distracted from him at times. Of course, his plan is, at some level, my personal belief and faith is that his plan is always the best for us, and we always do come around to that understanding by his grace and by the grace of Bhakti Devi. But it's all bringing me back to the question of why all this drama, why all this lengthy and complicated Leela around the Shamantaka jewel. It's full of gossip and rumor and murder and conspiracy and chasing, like a car chase, except it's a horse chase and then a foot chase, and the fight between Jambavan. It's a really fascinating Leela. It's something, it feels like an adult version of the Vrindavan Leelas with the demons, right? And the Vrindavan Leelas with the demons, it's all like child's play because Krishna is still playing that role of a child. But in this particular Leela, it feels like we're watching a scene out of a detective novel, right? Or some kind of like crime movie, action movie. Exactly. It would be a great action movie, Henry. Right. And so we're watching this plot unfold. And to me, I feel some small inspiration in my heart to be able to share with you that to me, it feels like Krishna wanted to play detective. Krishna really wanted to play detective. And all of this arrangement was for him, through Yogamaya's arrangement, to be able to feel the rasa, feel that experience of really finding out what is happening with the Shamantaka jewel. Who stole it? Where did it go? Why did it disappear into the forest? Why did it not come back? Going into the cave and then coming back to uncover the plot with Shatadanva and chasing after him and not finding the jewel on his body. Every one of these acts is a scene in this phenomenal drama where Krishna is experiencing, not knowing, but conjecturing and like playing as detective, his own little Scotland Yard kind of situation. And I just think that's amazing. And I think that's probably the only reason there is all this mayhem going on in Dwarka. It's for Krishna's benefit that there's all of this kind of a little bit gruesome, a little bit ugly stuff going on in Dwarka. It's for Krishna's benefit. Because there's no other reason it could happen. Dwarka is Vaikuntha. It's not just Vaikuntha, it's higher than Vaikuntha. Dwarka is an expansion of Krishna himself as his Dham. So that's the only reason it could happen. So those are my thoughts on this Leela. I think the only other thing I wanted to add is the question often comes up, why would a Kura be a part of this ugly plot to steal the Shamantaka jewel that leads to the murder of Shatadhanva. And Srila Prabhupada answers this, I think, really convincingly in Krishna book. And he says that when Kura took away Krishna from Vrindavan, the Vrajavasis were really not happy with Kura. And essentially, the disappointment, the unhappiness of the Vrajavasis for Kura taking away Krishna and Balaram allowed this kind of curse, essentially, it became a kind of curse on Kura that he had to suffer through. And thus he became involved in the theft of the Shamantaka jewel. Because Kura is an incredible, phenomenal devotee. If you read the pastimes of Kura taking away Krishna and Balaram, he's just overjoyed to see his Supreme Lord, and he is granted these amazing visions on the banks of the Yamuna of Lord Vishnu and Nandashesh, and he's not an ordinary soul at all. So it does not make any sense for him to be involved in this ugly plot and conspiracy in Dwarka, but he is, because he took Krishna away from the Brajavasis. And to me, that means in our lives, we really have to endear ourselves to the Brajavasis. There's just no question of ever hurting them, because if we hurt them, we'll end up in Dwarka. So that's all I have. I hope this was at some level gratifying to the devotees, and I'd love to open up for questions or comments.
A very gratifying class, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Thank you. Janita is throwing his hands up in the air in approval. Thank you.
Of course. Any thoughts, questions, comments, reflections?
Jamuna Jaya.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for class. And thank you so much for that last point about Kura, because I have to say, as we've been going along, when we hit that point in the pastime, I felt myself hit a hard stop. I was like, what? And because a lot early this year, I was so relishing in Akura's prayers, and I was reading them, and when I was on the chariot coming in, like, my Lord will see me, and, basking in the Akura, the exemplar of prayers. And then it came like, boom. And then it's even after I heard the explanation the first time, and I'd heard it before, it really made me question my own heart. And the fact that I wasn't, it questioned me my ability to understand and to have a more broader mind about why people do things. And that was really, I found the lesson for me, that I was really like, Kura, I love you. And then, nope, you're dead to me. Kind of was really my reaction. And then as we've been hearing people repeat Prabhupada's purport, as you did just now, I feel myself like, no, Jamuna Jaya, like, soften your heart. There's a reason behind this. People are not, that old thing about, hate the sin, don't hate the sinner. And it just really, for me, like, shone a spotlight on my way of like slamming the door on a person when they do one thing that's, and indeed is out of character. So I just wanted to thank you for reinforcing that again, because it's been every time I hear that part of the pastime, I could just feel myself go. And thank you so much for helping me to.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jamuna Jaya. I think it's amazing to see that there is so much humanness in the devotees of these pastimes. Like Satrajit, he's not an ordinary person. He gets to have darshan of Krishna, and yet he's so attached to the Shamantaka jewel. Kura is like so far beyond most devotees. He's so extraordinary, such an elevated soul, and yet he is also, he has his own desires, and I think it's a message to us that we can be devotees and still have we have desires and devotees. They're not something that is mutually exclusive. You know, we're humans, we're persons, and we have desires, and yet we're pursuing devotional life, yet we're pursuing a loving relationship with Krishna, and they can coexist because they coexist in the Dham. They're coexisting in our hearts too. The real question is, how much can we continue to purify those desires, not necessarily repress them? Because if we repress them, they'll just end up coming out in ugly ways. At least that's my brief reflection on what you said, Jamuna Jayaprabhu. And Jeffrey G.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for this class, and I appreciate the exuberant overview. That was very nice. You know, in continuing with that concept of purifying desires, it's very interesting to me, and I'm wondering if I'm noticing something that's actually there. The juxtaposition of Satadhanva and Satrajit, they both have a desire for the Shamantaka jewel. And Satrajit keeps losing it. And in devotion, it keeps returning to him somehow. Satadhanva, on the other hand, covets it and steals it. And he loses his head for that. And it's interesting because as you were giving the overview, you kind of get a more complete picture. And as you were talking about Satrajit, you said he keeps losing the jewel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, he does. It keeps and the other interesting point about that juxtaposition is at many times they are without the jewel. Even when Satadhanva loses his head, he doesn't even have it.
Right.
But he has that covetousness in his heart for it.
Yes.
And so he doesn't. So in both cases, they're not really in possession of the jewel, but they're in possession of desire for the jewel.
Right. And yet there's a difference between them.
And there's a difference.
And it reminds me of verses from the Ishopanishad that talk about how every living being has their quota. You know, every living being has what is given to them. And it's kind of almost pre-decided according to your janma and karma and according to your varna, your work in life. And it's important to note that the difference between Satrajit and Shatadhanva is Satrajit actually was the rightful person to hold that jewel, even though it wasn't good for him. And, you know, the world kept taking, the universe, Krishna, Maya kept taking it away from him. He wasn't getting the hint and eventually lost his life for that. He still was the rightful owner of the jewel because the sun god had given it to him. Whereas Shatadhanva, that was not a part of his quota in life. That was not a part of his share of karma in life. And his coveting what was not part of his share led to an immediate destruction of his life, you know, kind of finishing of his karmic cycle or untimely finishing of his karmic cycle. And so, yeah, that is really curious. They both were coveting this jewel, and yet it's so different, their relationship to it, because of all that comes to me is how every living being has their due in life, and it's something that we must come to terms with. I'm also reflecting a little bit more as we speak, Prabhu, on and especially in regards to the previous question, Jamuna Jai is mentioning how we come to these leelas and often we can take away like judgments about devotees, right? Even with Satrajit and Shatadhanva, we're kind of making judgments about people who live in Dwarka, not ordinary souls. We're making these judgments about them. And I think it's really important as we not only read Leela, but also live life knowing that our notions of, you know, good and bad and right and wrong, they are very tinged by the duality of this world. And Krishna exists at the absolute platform. He's totally above duality, which means nothing that is happening in this world can be bad for Krishna. It's all actually part of Krishna's arrangement. And if we keep that in mind, that whatever's happening, so-called good and so-called bad, is still at Krishna's level absolute, because it's part of Krishna's divine plan for everything to work out in this world. That absolute vision allows us to be at peace with ourselves and with everyone else in the world, with Kura, with Shatadanva, with Satrajit, with our best friend and our worst enemy. It gives us a sense of stability and security, knowing that this is all part of a divine unfolding of something extraordinary that I am not seeing yet. I'm seeing with my dual vision, but there's actually an absolute vision playing its course out in our lives. Anyone else wants to share something or bring something up?
Premananda, Vilas Prabhu,
Yes.
wonderful illustration. How do we understand free will? And when Krishna knows everything, he knows how everything is going to play out. Where's the room for free will and subsequently for love? If Krishna knows how I'm going to proceed, then how is it free will?
If we had more time, Prabhu, there's this really fascinating exercise that I would love to do with you. It's this beautiful exercise which explains how we can simultaneously have an experience of freedom and yet be directed by forces completely outside of our control. And we all know this happens in our life. We're trying to think, should I take job A? Should I take job B? Should I take job C? And we've applied to all three. But then Krishna goes ahead and makes sure that 2 of the offers get declined. So we only have really one option. So we have some free will in that. And at the same time, Krishna's taking away the options that aren't going to work anyway. So I think we have very minimal freedom in this life. Free will still exists, and it must exist. And this is an implicit teaching of the Gita, because Krishna says to Arjuna, now do as you wish. And he also asked the first question, the first statement in the Gita is, how did they act? These are very key questions which highlight the freedom of the jiva to choose how to act. And yet, the real maximum level of choice that we ever have, the acharyas and our teachers and our lineage, they explain, is to choose Krishna or to not choose Krishna. That is where our freedom shines. And that is the real the goal of our agency as free actors in this world. Every other choice that we make, most other choices that we make, are so governed by the modes of nature that even when we feel we are making free choices, they're not as free as we may think, or we may like to think, rather. So this is a nuanced answer. I don't think at all, I'm not trying to at all say that there is no free will. There absolutely is, but that free will only exists to the extent that we always continue to choose Krishna or not choose Krishna, because that free will must exist for us to be able to have the option and choice to love Krishna. Because there cannot be any love without freedom. There just can't. And so free will must exist, and it does exist despite Krishna's being all cognizant. Krishna exists in our heart. He knows us better than we do. And so he already kind of knows our choices. But his knowing our choices doesn't mean that when we make them, they're not free. Right? So, and there's just a few thoughts on a very deep and complex question that we could definitely spend a class talking about.
Nice. We're not as free as we think we are.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going on. Thank you. Wonderful class. Wonderful Q&A. Thank you, Prabhu.
Of course. And it's time for darshan. We can discuss more later. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, devotees.
Jai Shri Radha Murlidhar. Shri Guru Chandra Ki Jai. Jai. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Balakrishna and Nandini Radhika Ki Jai. Jamuna Jaya. Whoa. 3D Jamuna Jaya. Okay. All right. This was the class. Thank you, Premananda, Vilas. Krishna eliminates the options that aren't going to work anyway. That's my takeaway. That is so profound. Thank you. I'm going to meditate on that. So we were seen by the Lord. We heard about the Lord. We saw the Lord. Now we should be prepared to go out there and practice our free will. And our true freedom lies in the realm of devotional service. Our freedom to choose Krishna. Thank you. Wow. What a wonderful class. Straightforward, Krishna conscious. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank
Anyone
you.
want to say anything? I see devotees are smiling. Siham is smiling. What are you smiling, Siham, about? What is that?
Well, it's so simple and it's so profound and powerful at the same time. So, you know, when you encounter something simple and powerful, it just makes you smile because it has been always there. And just like making a realization this morning about something that it's so simple just means that my mind is so contaminated and I have to keep reminding myself of the real stuff. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, truth is profound and it makes you smile.
Thank you so much for a wonderful. Thank you for a wonderful class, Premananda Vilas, and doing your homework so well. And that overview was just fantastic. And You know, the little point that I picked up was how dangerous gossip is, you know, actually, because I've just been dealing with the situation of a men's group that I'm in, not devotees, but actually people I grew up with. And there's, you know, there's just one guy that just keeps saying bad things about other people who aren't present. And I've actually been really struggling with whether I should, you know, in what way I can tell him, you know. And I actually had a nightmare where I told him in a mean way, and I kind of went to a hell, you know.
Wow.
So Krishna taught me, you know, no gossip, never talk ill about anybody. So I
Yeah.
think that's really important, you know, and I've been hearing that from the devotees for years. So thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for
Thank
bringing
you
that.
for emphasizing that, Henry G. I really think that's one of the key lessons or teachings of this particular Leela, because everything is going wrong when people in Dwarka, including Satrajit, are starting to spread rumors. That's what gossiping is. Gossiping is talking about something you don't know the truth about. It's like, oh, this person told me this, or look at how this person is doing this. This must be the reason why. It's like talking about something that does not relate to you, but relates to others in a way that has no basis in truth. It has no basis in reality. It might be true, but that's not sufficient to, you know, talk about it. And that's what the people in Dwarka were doing. They were speculating about Krishna's stealing the jewel from Satrajit's brother. They were speculating about Krishna's having exiled a Kura, and all these things were not based in reality. They were not based in truth, and it caused so much havoc. It literally caused a cosmic, you know, level of reactions for the residents of Dwarka. Like the skies and the earth and everything was going wrong. They were creating such terrible reactions. Why? Because they were simply talking about things that wasn't their position, that it wasn't in their sphere of influence, it wasn't in their kshetra. And so they were talking about it in a way that was insensitive and not coming from a place of compassion, but coming from a place of, the word is ninda in Sanskrit, and I believe in Bengali, ninda, which is essentially blaspheming others without any kind of knowledge of the situation, spreading falsities and lies. So thank you, Enriji. That's like a really important point that you've helped me bring out more, that you brought out. Thank you so much.
And Srimad Bhagavatam is real. It's meant for real life. It's meant for practical application. And things are going to come up in our life. And that's what we have Srimad Bhagavatam class for. That's what Premananda Prabhu was doing his homework for. To give such a wonderful presentation so we can apply it. Thank you, Premananda Vilas. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, as always. Pleasure.
Jai. It's always Krishna's pleasure. All right. Have a wonderful day, everybody. We love you. Come again tomorrow. It was nice spending the time with you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Hare.